Welcome to Skytech-Lens. When Donald Trump began his second term with aggressive protectionist trade policies, few expected the main target to be Canada, America's closest ally. The White House's logic was blunt: America first. Tariffs on Canadian goods soared, aiming to repatriate jobs and protect U.S. industries. But instead of a manufacturing revival, the U.S. triggered economic chaos. The North American economy, deeply interwoven for decades, was never designed for such a rupture. A car part might cross the border half a dozen times before assembly. Tariffs didn't just hit Canada, they disrupted the entire supply chain, hurting both nations. The S&P 500 plunged, erasing over $1 trillion in household wealth. Grocery costs spiked by 11%, the sharpest rise since the 1970s. The tariffs, meant to shield America, inflicted immediate pain on its own people. The White House assumed Canada would fold under pressure. Instead, a new leader in Ottawa had other plans. Rather than plead for relief, Canada quietly pivoted, setting the stage for a dramatic shift in global trade. The U.S. expected submission. What it got was a strategic countermove that would leave it increasingly isolated. The game had changed, and Washington was the last to realize it. Ottawa's response was calm and calculated, led by new Prime Minister Mark Carney, a global financial heavyweight. Carney understood that in a world rattled by U.S. unpredictability, trust was the most valuable currency. Instead of a tit-for-tat tariff war, Carney launched the Great Diversification, rapidly seeking new trade partners. He and his cabinet toured world capitals, pitching Canada as a stable, reliable partner. The message: Canada is open for business and offers the resources the world needs. Within 90 days, Canada secured $47 billion in new trade deals, including a $12 billion pact with the EU, $8 billion in critical minerals to South Korea, and major energy contracts with Japan. Carney's strategy was a masterclass in economic statecraft, turning crisis into opportunity. By providing predictability, Canada quickly rerouted trade flows that had been locked in place for generations. The Carney gambit wasn't just defense. It was an offensive move to reposition Canada as a pivotal global player. As the U.S. turned inward, Canada seized the vacuum, forging a new independent path. The world took notice. For American families, the trade war hit home fast. Tariffs acted as a hidden tax, driving up prices on everything from groceries to gasoline. Walmart's CEO admitted the company had to raise prices on thousands of items. Food costs soared. Tomatoes alone jumped 21% as Canadian imports vanished. Gas prices in the Midwest surged past $4.85 a gallon as Canada redirected oil exports. Consumer confidence plummeted, with 62% of households blaming tariffs for their financial pain. The rhetoric of protectionism clashed with the reality of higher costs and shrinking budgets. The American dream felt more distant than ever. The industrial heartland, meant to benefit from tariffs, became ground zero for economic fallout. Ford reported $1 billion in tariff-related costs in 6 months, threatening jobs and competitiveness. The U.S. auto industry, reliant on cross-border parts, faced crippling shortages and production slowdowns. Aluminum tariffs backfired. U.S. smelters couldn't meet demand, and industries from Coca-Cola to aerospace paid the price. Agriculture suffered too. U.S. farmers couldn't fill the gap left by Canadian produce, and rising labor costs left crops rotting in fields. Business leaders and politicians who once cheered tariffs now pleaded for relief. The policy destroyed jobs instead of saving them, exposing the complexity of modern supply chains. The industrial reckoning was swift and brutal. America's attempt to protect itself had backfired spectacularly. As U.S. industries faltered, Canada thrived. Forced to rethink its trade relationships, Canada's exports to Europe and Asia soared. Greenhouse tomato exports jumped 38% in a single quarter. Overall, agricultural exports rose 23% as U.S. farm exports fell. Aluminum, targeted by U.S. tariffs, became a global hot commodity. Canadian smelters ran at full capacity. Order books filled for years. The share of Canadian exports going to the U.S. dropped from 78% to 68% in just 1 year. New partnerships solidified quickly, with the EU and Asian leaders praising Canada's reliability. Canada was no longer just America's neighbor. It was a key node in a new global trade network. The trade renaissance was about more than new customers. It was about forging a new independent identity. Canada's pivot was deliberate, strategic, and transformative. The world was watching and following suit. Canada's pivot revealed a deeper advantage: its vast reserves of critical minerals, lithium, nickel, cobalt, and rare earths. These resources are essential for electric vehicles, renewable energy, and advanced tech. While the US focused on old-world commodities, Canada cornered the market on the minerals of the future. New deals with South Korea and Japan secured long-term demand and made these economies dependent on Canadian supply. The US, meanwhile, remained reliant on China for rare earths, a major security risk. By alienating Canada, Washington squandered its best chance for mineral independence. US efforts to catch up were too little, too late. Building new supply chains would take years. Canada had quietly won a decisive victory in the race for the resources powering the 21st century. The trade war didn't just disrupt, it permanently reshaped North American supply chains. Mexico began bypassing the US, shipping oil directly to Canada for export to Asia, cutting out American refineries. Canadian exporters rerouted goods through Vancouver and Halifax, making direct shipping to Europe and Asia more profitable. Each new trade route marked a piece of the old North American economy breaking away. Officials projected a permanent reallocation of $120 billion in trade. The social fabric frayed too. Cross-border trips and tourism plummeted, devastating U.S. border communities. Florida alone lost over $6 billion in Canadian tourism revenue. The Great Rerouting wasn't just about goods, it was about people and relationships, now severed by tariffs. The U.S. found itself increasingly isolated, no longer the hub of continental trade. The consequences were profound and lasting. As economic pain mounted, U.S. political unity shattered. States reliant on Canadian trade, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, broke with the White House, demanding relief. Governors and senators who once supported tariffs now led the opposition. Public opinion turned sharply against the policy. 58% of Americans blamed tariffs for economic harm. Congress faced mounting pressure to reverse course. The tariffs, meant to project strength, exposed deep vulnerabilities and divisions. America was now divided not by a foreign adversary but by its own policies. The 2025 trade war created a new North American reality. For the first time, Canada's future is not defined by its relationship with the US. Under Carney, Canada's pivot is permanent. New trade deals, new infrastructure, and a focus on critical minerals have set it on an independent path. The US, once the continent's undisputed center, is now sidelined. Canada has proven it has options, and it's using them. The US must now rethink its approach to its most important ally. The lesson is clear: economic nationalism in an interconnected world is perilous. The US tried to isolate Canada and ended up isolating itself. Rebuilding trust will be a monumental task. The era of the post-American neighbor has begun. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more updates.